My man Lucas, friend of the channel Lucas, has once again brought us the gold with his question. He wants to know, what are we to do with this odd statement that Jesus makes about John in John chapter 21, verse 22? First, a little context. So in John 21, we have post-resurrection Jesus walking with Peter and talking with Peter. And during this walk, Peter notices John following them. And remember, it's John's gospel, the John who records this event, who is the only one who records this event, tells us about an interchange between Peter and Jesus that regards John himself. So let's dig in and take a look at John 21:21, where from the ESV, where it says, "When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, 'Lord, what about this man?'" So let's look at that quote here in Koine. Kyrie hutos de ti. So Kyrie is the word Lord in the vocative case. So the case of calling. So he says to Jesus, Lord. It's like if you're calling someone, Lord. And then what does he say to him? Hutos de ti. Hutos, this man, de, and ti, what? So literally he says, Lord, and this man, what? But we can imply from this, Lord, and what about this man? So John has Peter concerned with what Jesus has in mind for John. Now that's a little convoluted, so I want to say that a second time. John, as the writer of John's gospel, has Peter concerned with what Jesus has in mind for John. We tend to write ourselves into our own stories. Let's move on to verse 22. Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So let's look at the Greek. Again, we're just going to the quote. Eon auton thelo menein heos erkomai ti pro se. At the beginning, aeon, which is if, or in this case it could even be even if, because he's posing a hypothetical question. Aeon is the if that we use with non-indicative moods. And thelo, our verb, is a subjunctive. It's a present active subjunctive first person singular. Jesus says, even if I should desire, or even if I should want or will, and then we have auton, him, as the subject of the infinitive menein, to remain. Even if I should desire him to remain, heos, until erkomai, I come. That's the big if here. If I should desire, even if I should desire him to remain until I come, until the second coming, before we move on to the next part, I want to talk about the subjunctive mood and this if. Normally, when we have this aeon and a subjunctive verb, we get what's called a third-class condition. It's a hypothetical. It's putting forth a possibility for consideration in a conversation. And here, normally we would have what's called a protasis, the if, and an apodosis, what the outcome of the conjunction of the condition is, like what the natural thing is. So, if you really loved me, you would massage my feet, right? So the protasis, if you really loved me, it's a hypothetical. I don't know for sure. I'm putting it out there for conversation. The apodosis, the way I would know you really loved me is if you rub my feet, right? That's what we're talking about. Here, we get the protasis, but no apodosis. Instead, we get a question posed after the condition to Peter. So what's the protasis? If I should desire, if I might desire, if I might want him to remain, to abide, him being John, until I come, until the second coming, then we get this incredible nugget at the end, ti pros se. T we had in the previous verse. What? Pros to say you. What is it to you? What business is that of yours? So it doesn't tell us what the outcome of the condition is. It's a confrontational hypothetical. If I should desire for him to abide until I come, what does that have to do with you? What business is that of yours? It's an incredible thing here. If I decide to have him live for thousands of years, that's no concern of yours. Now, let's talk about John a little bit. John is the only apostle who died of old age. He's the only apostle who doesn't die a violent death. And all scholars agree that John, of the 4 canonical Gospels, is the last one written. Some have it dated as early as 70 A.D. Others have it dated as late as 157 A.D., which would be long past the natural lifespan of John. But that's not the important thing. The important thing here is it's surely in the latter half of the 1st century A.D. The question is, how many, if any, of the apostles have already died violent deaths? If any, we don't know, because we don't know how early or late in the 1st century this document is written. But it's interesting to note that the only guy who lives to old age from the cohort of the 12 includes in his gospel this strange encounter between Peter and Jesus that calls into question the future of John. How long will John live? Will John outlive all the rest? I don't know, but that's none of your business, Peter. If I should decide to have him abide, because remember, when he's writing, he's still alive, right? If I should decide to have him abide until I come, what is that to you? None of your business, none of your concern. It's fascinating that the rebuke of Peter concerning a potential long life for John is written by John after potentially some or most or even all of his peers have been put to death. We don't know, but it's interesting food for thought, isn't it? Now, let's get to the very best part of this thing, the last phrase. Sumoi akoluthe. Su, you, moi, me in the dative case as the indirect object of the action of the verb. Akoluthe, follow in the second person singular. Present active indicative, second person singular. You follow or are following me. That's how Jesus wraps this thing up in John's account of Peter's conversation with Jesus about the future of John. You are following me. Now, I want you to notice something. The verb here is not an imperative. We might expect an imperative, a command to Peter. You, Peter, be about following me. That's what an imperative would signal. But it's not an imperative. It's a present active indicative, the mood that indicates the way things are, second person singular. You, Peter, are following me. You follow me. Not I follow you. You report to me. I'm the master, you're the disciple. You're not the master and I'm not the disciple. I don't explain myself to you. You just follow me. Now, there is semantic range within this indicative verb to treat it like an imperative, but I want you to contemplate this with me. If John, the writer, wanted it to be seen as a command, the way to absolutely make sure it's seen as a command is to use a verb in the imperative mood, but he doesn't. He uses specifically and intentionally the indicative mood so that we have that range to understand it as simply a statement of fact. From the master to the disciple, you are following me. I'm not following you, you're following me. This is fantastic. What I do with John is not your concern, Peter. Why? Because you are following me. Powerful, magnificent stuff. When I was a young man, about 16, I got my first job on a construction site working with older men. And there was a guy that I worked with. You've probably noticed I'm verbose. I talk a lot and I question everything. There was an older man on the job who used to like to say to me, "Don't worry about the mule going blind, just load the wagon." What does that mean? He was saying, you're asking questions about the mule going blind, which is something that occurs at the very front of this operation. If there's a mule pulling a wagon, his eyesight, the mule's eyesight, is at the very front of the operation. But my job as a laborer was at the very back of the operation. My job was to just load the wagon. It was his way of saying, whatever's happening with John, whatever's happening with the mule's eyesight, doesn't concern you. Your work is at the back of the wagon, loading the wagon. Fantastic stuff. Like John has Jesus say to Peter, whatever happens to John is on the other end of this operation and doesn't have anything to do with you. Your work is on the backside loading the wagon. Fantastic, magnificent stuff. Lucas, regardless, here are the things to take away from this fantastic exchange that John records between Jesus and Peter. The fantastic thing is that the issue of how long John would abide is a confrontational hypothetical. It isn't to be taken as a literal statement about the longevity of John's life. It just poses the if so that Peter can learn where he belongs in this situation. If I should desire that this man remain until I come, what does that have to do with you, Peter? Nothing is the implied answer to that question. It has nothing to do with you. Why? Because sou moi akolothei. You are following me. You're not leading John. You're certainly not leading me. You're not responsible for the mule going blind. You are just at the back end of this thing, like John, following me. Powerful, potent stuff. Magnificent stuff. So, great metaphor for discipleship. When you start looking around and questioning how things are going with other people and the way things are happening, just remember, it's not up to you to worry about the mule going blind. You're a follower, and perchance, perhaps, it's just for you to load the wagon. Thanks again, Lucas, for your gold. You always bring gold with your questions. And this one is no different. If that was good for you, for anyone who's watching, please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, share the channel, share the video on social media. And until next time, Karas Kairene Humin, grace and peace to you.